Welcome to Dark Sorcery. I'm Alfredo Martinez, and I have with me once again Guion Hughes
Right.
and Gazelam.
Woohoo!
And today, this is going to be a topic on Enochian magic. Enochian, however you say it, however some people choose to say it. So we're going to be discussing the ins and outs of it. Now, guys, some people say that Enochian is actually based on a much older angelic practice. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think it's been proven that John Dee would go back to earlier grimoires like the Arbital, the Tematron. I mean, there's a lot of even that original Sill. The angels told him to look in his old books to find the Sill, and then they modified it into this. But what the original is from the Sworn Book of Honorius, so it must have had been influenced by earlier things. What do you think, Guion?
Yeah, well, the whole legend is that, and that's part of the reason that it got eventually named Enochian, even though John Dee didn't call it Enochian. He was. The idea is that Enoch was the one who had the original language, so that this was supposed to be close or exactly like the language that God spoke when He spoke the world into being in Genesis. Where it says God said, "Let there be light." This is what he said. He didn't say
like kind of like the language Adam spoke before the Tower of Babel incident, right?
Yeah. Before the perfect language.
Adamic,
That's the lore that they, and that was the idea, was when he reached the angels. He's like, tell me this, and they're like, we got to teach you a whole nother language because we can't really like describe in your like guttural kind of language that's been messed up through all these years and into whatever like 1500s English. It's like we can't really even like tell you anything without it being barbaric kind of, or not, it's not angelic worthy. So instead of like telling him secrets, the angel said, we got to teach you a whole nother language, a whole nother writing system, and this is the language that Adam knew, the original language. So that's like the whole lore of it, right? Whether you believe John Dee or not, and whether you believe, what that anything in the Bible at all, right? I mean, right? But I mean, there is, writing and speaking, obviously, in the Bible is a huge thing, and then that's where they're coming from. I believe it's like the original, and they were teaching them how to write basically new scriptures, new language that could have turned into a huge, like, I guess. New religion, offshoot of Christianity. They believed that this was going to be a new book, a new religion that was going to come in again. Because the Christians are always talking about the end times, the apocalypse. It was supposed to come in, so this would be the real book, the real language. Everybody would learn it, and the people that learn that would be like the 100,000 or whatever that would actually go into heaven, and everybody who didn't get this would just perish with the demons.
The reason I asked about it being based on an older practice is because a lot of the practices that's used in this exists in older types of magic.
Oh yeah, Amidal. I believe he placed it on Amidal magic is what they were. There's a little bit of Goetia too, and a lot of things like that. I mean, I could definitely see things like that, but I believe the base of it. And I remember when I was taking the classes with Lon, he said that was the base thing, was Amidal magic, which is usually you see what they do is they put candles, and they have like they have, it's hard to describe it. Maybe it's kind of like a card, and they put candles through the card, and all these things kind of like they look kind of like this. This is more like Enochian, but I don't know if you can see it.
Fire
That's
tablet.
the
That's
the
what
tablets
I've
and all the
too. The fire
designs and the
tablet.
sigil day of meth, and everything.
Mhm.
That was there, and then there's candles on there, and it would kind of be on a thing like that, and they'd burn the candles and incantate and pray and do things over it or whatever. Those were so I believe it's based mostly on Amidal and a lot of other
A
elements
lot
from
of
other things.
Agrippa.
Yeah, Agrippa for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There was also in 1994 there was a book called the Book of Soiga that was only recently discovered how to figure out what the writings were on it. And I guess that Dee had that book and was really obsessed with it and always trying to figure out what the code was, and never did. And it was actually 1990, in the 1990s, finally cracked the code. But that what makes me think too that there was a, you know, John Dee was involved with espionage and all sorts of things, and so these could very well have this alternative motive of being some sort of secret code that was actually had a utilitarian type of purpose to it, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and I believe that there's definitely elements of that for sure. And then the famous 007, you know, that was his code name that Ian Fleming took for his books to, you know, to for James Bond and the modern you know,
We
espionage
talked
things.
about that, how the tubal cane is the two balls and the cane is the 007.
Yeah. Well, the idea he had, the 007 was the two O's were the eyes, and then the 7 was like, you know, so it's like he's looking at, so it's like that's where
He's
it
all
really was
spying on
from. He's like, hey, you know, he's like be aware, you know, look. So the 7 is like your hand, you know, trying to like, you know, shade the sun. And that's so like that's the 007. It's kind of backwards. I mean, but you can see that's how it is in the movies, even, you know. So that's what it really came from. Is he was like that, and then but people when they hear 007, they don't put that together that much, and so they think, you know, that that's just his code word or code name or whatever.
Now, would you say that John Dee was told not to reveal a part of this magical system, which is kind of like maybe why it's kind of like open-ended and open to interpretation as far as how they put things together?
There's no proof that he even ever worked with it, or they even did anything outside of actually building the system itself. There's no proof that they even worked with it, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's people that prefer I think it was depurism, which is they try to follow the method that, as ambiguous as it is, that John Dee followed. And then there's also what's called Neo-Enochiana, which is kind of a modified system from the Golden Dawn, which is what I guess most people follow.
Yeah.
You guys go into the second category mostly?
Yeah, for sure. Me, I mean, I definitely, I mean, that's the thing with John Dee also, and I think we touched on this before, is you know, part of the preparation for this was intense prayer and philosophizing about God. And I mean, he was an intense Christian. So if you're like, you know, some modern occultist and you want to do depurism, I don't know if that'll really work for you, you know, unless you're a highly, I mean, even more, and a Christian in the 1500s was a lot different than a Christian now, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, that's
a lot different.
So, I mean, you can find, I mean, out of every Christian you talk to, I bet, you know, there's almost none that are like John Dee, right?
Yeah.
So the idea, well, if I can recap, because I did a little research on that, is so it was in the 1580s, you know, when John Dee was working with all this with Edward Kelly, and Edward Kelly, you know, you know, was known as kind of like a con man, charlatan, alchemist, which basically, you know, the whole idea of alchemy back then was metallurgy a lot, turning lead or other metals into gold, which modernly we could do that, right? We could even make fake diamonds. We could make fake gold. You know, it's just basically messing with alloys to make it look like gold. I mean, it was so you know, you can see how that, you know, basically is counterfeiting a lot, you know. So he was like that, you know. The dynamic too, a lot of people don't realize, is John Dee was like in his 60s and Edward Kelly was in his late 20s, right? He was probably like 26, 27 when he met John Dee and started doing this. And he'd already got his ears cut off for you know, messing around and defrauding people with the alchemy stuff.
I think that was I think that was back for actually counterfeiting money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think back then, I mean, I don't think they had paper money. So I mean, I think
it was coinage.
Fake gold coins or any kind of, you know, once you made the fake gold, you could mint them into any coins and put anybody's face, or, you know. So yeah, he, you know, that was that was the main thing that alchemists did, that I mean, of his elk or whatever. And he also was famous for talking to an innkeeper who said somebody left or traded some, somebody who was on their last times or on a bender, actually left manuscripts and black powder in a crystal that we had all these alchemic secrets. That's what he said, right? That's what Edward Kelly said, and he said he bought those, and the inside the crystal, this black powder actually was the philosopher's stone that would actually turn things into gold. And so that he did a whole thing on, he did his own book on alchemy and everything. I'm not sure exactly when it was in the time, but I mean, so that's an important thing to consider. Is John Dee was in his 60s, this guy was in his late 20s, and he was also, I guess, in the 1500s equivalent of like a juvenile delinquent. So he was kind of like taking it as John Dee's ward, like almost like he's on, parole or probation or something. He was, I think John Dee was kind of like more fatherly to him, was dominant. Obviously, that was an older man and a younger man, and the dynamic was definitely, he was the dominant one. John Dee was the operator, in Magic they call it the operator, the magician. A lot of people confuse, especially modernly, we don't really talk about this that much. Is there in the old time Magic, even back in the last century with Aleister Crowley, they always had a magician or an operator and a seer. And the seer was like more the one that was actually psychic and had psychic talents. They could actually see these things once the magician. So John Dee would write up these kind of tablets. He would be writing up these kind of tablets and stuff. And you know, when and he would write up the tablets, and then John Dee would Edward Kelly would interpret them and come up with the actual languages that they, these strange characters, and interpret what they said. So that was the whole thing,
That's what
this
was
is what
cool
they're saying,
about how they used this, is that it was an actual dial decoder.
Yeah.
Would turn different directions, and that's how you'd come up with the different god names.
Yeah. And they put those on wax seals also, and put them under the table.
Would you guys say that this is
kind
of a spiritual technology, where, because there's some people that they make a design of the holy table, and then they'll take the Gazelam, the Ameth, and then just put it right on top, and then some people start having visions right away, like the energy flow starts to go.
For sure.
Would you guys say you've had similar experiences?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I studied with Lon, he had the whole setup. I got to take some pictures of it. He had several different setups, and he actually was the first one to make these things here that were, these.
Yeah, where he made them more three-dimensional.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that they're up.
That's
up,
cool.
Because they were supposed to be up, but nobody ever even had that before Lon did that, like in the 60s. And he told a whole story. It's funny about how the guy who did those was like on acid, and he was like a machine worker, and he would do it like on acid and just do on this like, micro things, and like any like a little micro thing, and his finger would be cut off, right? But he worked him on a lathe and made these all for him, but he said he couldn't do it unless he was on acid, because it was in the 60s where because Lon's a hippie, back in the old days. And
yeah,
so
it's crazy.
I got to go,
little
study this intensely with Lon, and that's really what got me started into it a lot. And that was some good times. We did a whole.
Well, let's hear more. Let's hear a little bit about how you guys got into Enochian magic.
Well, let just really quick back on the last question. I think what's really exciting contemporarily is that so much information has come out with the digitization of the libraries, with all the research that people like Joseph H. Peterson have done, finding these old books. One really exciting thing in September coming up, this is 2024, is they're going to put out Joseph F. Peterson's third edition of the 5 Mysteries of Enochian, which is a beautiful book. And he goes so deep into the research that has only been found out within the last few years and things. I mean, he's been studying Enochian since the 70s, and it's incredible because he was one of the first people to actually take microfiche pictures of some of that material. And his material, he has better photos than the current digitized version, because so much of that has started to deteriorate from use and people going through it. But it's really exciting because we live in a time now, and I've mentioned this back on the earlier podcast that we were in, that, you know, in John Dee's time, he was probably the smartest person in Europe and had the largest library, because they had gone through all the monasteries, had fallen apart, and taken all the books and things. And so he had like this huge, impressive library. But today we have more than that just on our cell phone. So it's pretty incredible, like how things have advanced. And I mean, even since when Lon and when you and people were doing this stuff, so many things are coming about that it's almost to the point where it's like, are people willing to modify their ideas of what it is? Because Enochian has always had so many holes and missing pieces in it that are starting to get the blanks filled in. And so where at one time, like we were talking, the Golden Dawn systems and things, you know, they came up with their own way to work with the system. But as we're going along, we're finding out more and more. So it's pretty exciting.
Now, Gazelam, would you say that's probably the most exciting thing about living in today that's coming out that pertains to the Enochian system?
For me, because I like the academic side of it, and that's what's really fun for me, and especially the history, and then finding out what the influences were and how it came about. And so for me, that's what it's exciting. And yeah.
Right on. What about you, Guion? What's exciting about today that's coming out that sheds new light on the system of magic?
I mean, I feel that Enochian, the way that it's come down is like it's become something totally different now. You know, I mean, what my idea of it, and I had a vague understanding of generalizing the different magical systems, right, when I was younger and not as adept as now. And the idea was that the Goetia was like, you know, discovering and exploring the demonic realms, you know, and there's also angelic parts of that also. And Enochian was like a newer system that actually explored the angelic realms. But then we've learned from the people practicing Enochian, from John Dean and Edward Kelly, from Aleister Crowley and Victor Newborg. I mean, it's not necessarily angelic, you know. I mean, these beings are not what you consider angels, you know. I mean, there's weird sex things involved, which is like you wouldn't think that about angels. So that's more along the lines of like, you know, just spirits in general, which I think is what this is all about. And I think the whole idea of putting angels and stuff was John Dee's programming of the 1500s and trying to find more Christianity based systems, and then having Enochian in the Satanic Bible, which was like really interesting, why it's there and what its purpose is and stuff, and looking at the whole idea of Gnostic Christianity and the Nag Hammadi library, that also getting, you know, that was discovered in the 1950s after Aleister Crowley even died and everything. It wasn't really even, a lot of these things weren't even really like approached and properly translated until like the early 2000s, you know, for these books. And then those books are talking about how angels are not the good guys, you know, and how, you know, coming up with this system maybe is like, you know, to come up with the apocalypse or coming up with the end of times is like, you know, having the demiurges, demons, like, you know, which we're calling angels, destroy everything or whatever, you know what I mean? So there's all these other different takes on it, the morality of it, and the black and white of good and evil and God and Satan and all that has been totally
Sort of
moved
would you
around.
say that it's sort of as far as angels go, it's sort of shades of gray now when you read, you know, kind of what had happened with, let's say, go ahead, Gazelam.
I just want to go on that subject, the way he was talking about translations and things, because that is one thing that's interesting about the Satanic Bible, and then the calls is the translation. If you look at the first key here, the last line of the first key is move therefore and show yourselves, open the mysteries of your creation, be friendly unto me, and I am the servant of the same your God, the true worshiper of the highest. But then you look at Anton LaVey's version, and it says, be friendly unto me, for I am the same, the true worshiper of the highest and infallible king of hell.
So let me ask you this. What would you say that LaVey's connection was with this magical system? For him to put
I think he learned it. You know, he was studied it of what Aleister Crowley did, and I don't know if anybody's familiar with what the workings of Aleister Crowley did with this Enochian magic. You know, he took on a scribe just like John Dee did, called Victor Newburgh, and he was a younger guy, and it was the same kind of almost dynamic. The thing is Crowley, of course, was way more, you know, non-Christian, right? I guess for lack of a better term, way more sexual, way more, you know, more like he was in the 19th century, not the 15th century, right? So he you know, he did this stuff, and it eventually, you know, full on had a homosexual affair with Victor Newburgh, and he put in the diaries about how they had sex and how these certain things, you know, were the sex magic and the Enochian together, like did all this stuff, and there was like things that even at the time, yeah, the voice of the vision. That's the Alice. So I mean, I believe that and that was a very rare book, and that was very rare to even find that. So when Anton LaVey was approached about, you know, hey, can you put together some stuff? And I believe that, you know, the whole Satanic Bible, and it hasn't turned into this, but my sources tell me that when Anton actually was approached with this, he was actually looking at this as kind of like a book version of like the Spook House or the Fun House, you know, because he was a carnival guy, right? So so it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like in the back of a comic book, it'd say like, hey, send us $1 and we'll send you the Satanic Bible. It's got all these stuff. If you say these things, your neighbor will be cursed, or you say these things, a demon will appear before you. So you know, kind of like the whole X-ray specs and those kind of like, yeah, he was going for like more of a like you know, like that, like a back of a comic book, back of a men's magazine,
right?
You know, back of a Hustler. Hey, you know, go to the Satanic Bible, and you don't even know what you're dealing with here. And you know, people that are into that are already reading, you know, nudie mags or comic books, you know, kids were like, oh yeah. So I believe he just does that, and he's like, okay, well, here, I got this stuff. And he probably heard the stories, because I mean, in the voice of the vision in the diaries, it does go into the sexual affair between Crowley and Newburgh, and the actual sex that they had around it and stuff like that. And which actually John Dee and Edward Kelly had a similar sexual thing that happened, where the angels told them to swap wives, which you know, and there may have been more going on that they didn't document, right? Because there was the dynamic of a dominant male and a lesser dominant male. But you know, in the 1500s, it was a lot different than the 19th century, the 1900s, and so you know, there's that sexual element. I think that Anton was just like, I'll put that in there, and he rephrased a lot of. I mean, like for example, Belial in most rabbis, you know, in Hebrew say Belial actually means without worth, right? And so Anton said, well, my interpretation is without master. Right, which is a lot different, right?
Just makes everything edgy.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's taking something. You know, if you say, "Hey, my name is Bilal," it means without worth, without any worth. Yeah, that's not that good, right? But without master, it's like, yeah, I'm a rebel, and like F you, you know, everybody. You know, I mean, right, you know, I mean, without a master, I mean, I don't have any masters. That's not bad, right? I mean, from the perspective of somebody reading the Satanic Bible, you know,
it does sound a lot more cool.
He put a different spin on everything, you know, and that's and I think Anton was kind of like the Aleister Crowley of our century, or of our later century, right? Even though, you know, because he was past that. He did it in the 1960s. Crowley did this in the early 1900s. You know, like he died in 1947. which a fun fact, I just learned this. I want to state this. You know, like how that's one of the reasons Aleister Crowley got famous was he's on the cover of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, right? You know, the Beatles, right? So actually, I've heard, and I believe I didn't put this together till recently, is that was the Beatles' nickname for Aleister Crowley was Sergeant Pepper,
Oh
and
well.
like in the beginning of the song it says they put that album out, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, in 1967, and it says 20 years ago today, Sergeant Pepper taught the band to play, and 20 years earlier in 1947 was when Aleister Crowley died. You know, so that Sergeant Pepper is Aleister Crowley, you know, and I guess that would be a good nickname for him because he's spicy and he's kind of like demanding, you know. I can see Sergeant Pepper. That's like a little cartoon nickname for him. But anyway, back on the subject. Yeah, there's a lot of sex around the Enochian, which you wouldn't think would be with angels, you know, because original sin and most Christianity is like frowns on sexuality, frowns on all kinds of stuff like that. So that's where I think, you know, there's a lot of stuff like that comes into being, you know.
That's funny how you said they'd put a little thing like send us $1 or whatever, because when I bought this Satanic Bible, they used to put these little cards in there that say vampires exist, and
Yeah.
all the occult books would have these in there, and if you read it, it says the priesthood of UR, send $5 US to Temple of the Vampire.
Now, let's go back to an earlier question. How did you guys first get into the Enochian system? For me, it was just kind of going, you know, looking in the Golden Dawn, you know, Israel Regardie book, and then just kind of stumbling onto and then just going from there. But where did it start for you guys?
You want to go first, or you want me to go first?
I'll go. I got a little bit frustrated with it because I got into the Golden Dawn and started really studying that. And if you look in this giant tome of the Golden Dawn, it's the very, very last chapter, chapter 10, that finally goes into the Enochian system. And so for me, it always seemed like this pinnacle of magic. Like if you can learn Enochian, then that's the ultimate system of magic that you could ever learn. It's the highest. And so even with my tarot card of the Hierophant,
Well, that's badass. I like that.
That's what I used as my elementals, were those Enochian systems, because I had in my head that this is, you know, the pinnacle of magic if you can learn the system. But then it didn't take long getting into it with you know, magic for beginners and some of lawn systems and things like that, is that you'd start to look at them and there were so many contradictions and missing blanks and pieces that I just got frustrated and didn't really get into it much. For me, actually, most of this material that I have on Enochian was hand-me-downs from my buddy that was really into it and involved with the calls. He's the one that made these and sends me all this Enochian stuff. So that's my story with Enochian. But,
Well,
you know, Guion's more, he's actually doing the calls and stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so when I was first, I mean, I've been into the occult like since I was a child, and then as a teenager, I started exploring different things. The only books really available as a teenager in the 1980s, because it was Satanic Panic and all that, unless you found like a witchcraft store or like a witch store, which there was a couple, like, but they were very rare, and then they actually got targeted, you know, with the Satanic Panic, with pickets and stuff like that. And I was a teenager, so I was kind of a little, I didn't have a way to go there, and I kind of had to hide this stuff from my parents. And so the only books that were available were the Satanic Bible and the Necronomicon. And both of those, you know, and I'm talking to Simon Necronomicon. We did a video about that before. It's by Simon, Avon Books put it out. Anyway, those two books were available, I think, largely because people thought they were jokey kind of books, like I was saying, maybe like, oh yeah, send $1, we'll send you the Satanic Bible, it's scary. And the Necronomicon, the same thing, it's made up. It's based on a fictional name that H.P. Lovecraft came up with. I think that for that reason, and also the Satanic Bible was popular back then because there was a lot of Christians buying that so they could find out what information about Satanism, so they could accuse other people of being Satanists, or they could like avoid being
Like the hypocrites.
they could avoid Satanism, right? Because it's there's stories where people were saying that cartoons were satanic, the Smurfs were satanic little demons, little so things like that. So they were obviously Satanic Panic. They were obsessed with Satanism like that. So that was the first thing. And Enochian obviously is in the Satanic Bible. When I got it, I was like, well, this is really interesting. I thought it was something totally different. I researched it later and found out, no, it wasn't. Had nothing to do. This wasn't. Anton LaVey didn't bring it, invent it. Aleister Crowley didn't invent it. It was John Dee and all this stuff. I found out about that little by little here and there. I really got into this though, and I had studied a lot on witchcraft, so I was pretty fairly adept at occult and understanding of and I read a lot of Aleister Crowley. I read Theory of Practice and Magic, and the book 4, the Big Blue Brick, and Gems of the Equinox and things like that. So I approached the OTO here in Los Angeles. I approached the lodge and started hanging out with them, and for this was around 2015 or 2016, 17. I don't know. It was earlier, and so Lon would appear, go to the lodge from time to time and do classes and things like that, and he would do it on all kinds of things, on Thelema, on Enochian, on a Goetia, on everything, and so I got to meet him, and he goes, hey, he invited me to his every Monday. He had a Monday night magic class, he called it, right? And people would go, they would just go, and he would do his thing in his living room, and him and his wife would serve things. And his wife is a very accomplished magician also. She's more natural though. And they were great. It was like having these magical grandparents kind of. And so I went, and he did an Enochian thing, and he said, well, we're gonna do Enochian every time for that. And he had the whole thing, the whole setup with the tables, and he had the wax things, and he had all that. And yeah, just the energy of that was giving me a lot of energy, a lot of tapping me into a lot of power. Then he said we're going to do Enochian for like the next 6 months every week. So I went to that. We did Enochian. He's one of the experts in it, I believe, and he would chant the ethers. He would have everybody else chant. We would do basically group rituals with Enochian. Everybody would chant. He would chant, and it was kind of like, it was just the closest you could come to modern, like, I guess you would say it's neo-Enochian. It was more Golden Dawnish, because none of this stuff is proof that, like those tables and all that stuff that he had is proof that John Dee did anything like that. But this is from the Golden Dawn and from his book. So we did all that, and that alone gave me a basis for just knowing Enochian and able to really hack the system. And at the end of the video, as a surprise, I'll teach people how to hack Enochian, even though it's complicated and everything like that. My secret of how to hack Enochian. I'll do my own video on it too. I mean, I think I don't know if I've done one yet or not, but
I don't
how
think
to hack
so.
Enochian, hack through all the silliness and all that, doing all these things, and why I think it works, and what I think people are actually tapping into. Which that's an actually interesting question. I don't know if you guys would comment on that. So, and I know Gazelam is more atheist, and stuff like that. So if this works, what do you think we're actually contacting? I mean, the idea is we're contacting spirits, and John Dee contacted spirits. They gave him this stuff. If you want to believe that, maybe he just made it all up or whatever. But what are we actually contacting? If it's, you call it angel, demon, I mean, those are just terms, right?
I mean, I guess you could call it angels, but it's not this type of angels that's been described in the Bible. It's something different.
What's the purpose altogether at all? Because when you look at the Goetia and stuff, you invoke or you work with those demons and communicate with them because they have certain attributions and there's certain reason that you're working with that. But no one really knows what the purpose of Enochian was. Is it angelic espionage? Because essentially what it came down to is it was like, well, this is a way in order to contact the angels so you can spy on people. That's pretty much was the only reason, from what I understand, of what it was even why they were working it, is to spy on other people through some type of angelical vision. Like,
there's definitely that aspect there. I mean, and I believe it's called the Heptarchia. I mean, that there's the watchtowers. I mean, there's different parts of the system. In the Heptarchia, I believe that they have, you know, actual spirits that correlate to like the planets, right? So you could like actually contact a angel or a spirit that is more like towards Jupiter or Mars, or and those attributes, obviously Mars is war, Jupiter's more like the king, royalty or riches or happiness or life or whatever. And in doing that, you could be like, okay, I'm going to tap into Jupiter and find out how long this person's going to live, or I'm going to tap into Mars and find out how war ready Denmark is or something, right? I mean, they use the planetary energies, which is very similar to what you see in Goetia, and there's also they also were asking the angels for things similar that you would ask in the people at the time if they were contacting the Goetian demons, with like buried treasure and metallurgy, how do we turn, I mean, in their diaries, they were asking these things. How do we get gold? How do we get this? How do we do this? They were asking for favors of these spirits, just like people would ask with the demonic spirits in Goetia. So I think it was along the same lines. I mean, they called it angels and all that because they were official. They were in, the queen's court. And if they said, oh yeah, we're talking to demons instead, they'd be, and eventually they did get that anyway. So eventually what happened,
And that is what's curious about the vision and the voice and the calls in here, is that it actually has the cry or the call, and it has the name of the angel, and then it's almost like a channeling type of session where you actually have a communication or a poem written with each one. And so that seems to have more of a practical purpose of where there's an outcome to it,
Yeah. Well, and this comes into the whole thing of the concept of high magic and low magic, right? So low magic basically is everything you want, any physical thing in this world, right? So like if you're contacting an angel, a demon, a spirit of God, or anything, like, oh, please let me get money so I can pay my rent, or get money, or let me get a lover, let me get I'm in love with this girl, I want her, any of these like physical needs, things, that's all low magic they consider, right? No matter if that's your goal, is getting something, your intention is getting something for this physical body, this royalty, fame, any of that stuff, wealth, it's all low magic. High magic is ascending into whether what you want to say, the great work, into godhood or close to God or whatever, or and so this has two parts. I believe that there is a part of it that's low magic, that you could actually ask things and maybe even have espionage and stuff like that, whatever benefits for the I mean, John D is accredited, for better or worse, of creating creating the term English Empire, so for the English Empire, still low magic. For espionage, still low magic. Higher magic, creating a book that actually revolutionizes and puts Christianity on its head and welcomes in the end times. And anybody who understands this book is going to actually go into a higher level. That's high magic. You're ascending beyond or descending below this physical realm and all the lusts and the wants and the riches and the problems. You're ascending or descending, if you want to say, above all that, if you go into high magic. Low magic is just, you could make up anything. I mean, I'm sure anybody could just chant one of these things, and if they're thinking about, whether they're wanting that or not, if they're thinking about their problems, it's going to affect their problems some way. that's how I believe, right? How magic works. So
Right. Well, about the system of magic, it can seem pretty elaborate to someone who's maybe not studied it or looked into it. But once you have the setup going, the magic really is easy. Would you say that some people tend to just overcomplicate this more than it should be?
yeah, I mean, I think they need that though. People need that, so that's part of their suspending disbelief, you know. So if it's too easy, people don't believe in it, you know. So I mean, all these tables and all this, and you know, once you build your philosophy past all that, I don't think you need all that anymore. But people that don't believe in that and they're like, oh well, of course, if I just say a few of these weird words, something's gonna happen. That's not gonna happen, right? Well, then go back and write all these things until your brain and your logical mind is telling you it's not going to work. It's confounded. So you got to illogic it enough to be logical. I mean, all this
So,
stuff is logical, illogical. It's actually a way to actually, you know, kind of build this cognitive dissonance, this suspension of disbelief, where you become magical and you're like, okay, I just say this.
so in other words, it's kind of like their subconscious mind their mind tries to tell them that, okay, this is real because you put a lot of time and work into this, so don't
Yeah.
make it a waste of time. Therefore, it
Yeah.
must be real.
Because
Sunk
in the end,
cost
I mean,
fallacy.
well, who knows what that really even means? All this stuff, you know. I mean,
The sunk
it could
cost
be.
fallacy.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a form of almost hypnotism, you know. I mean, getting your conscious mind to believe, to like, not
Well,
really necessarily, but letting your subconscious mind take over, your higher
right.
self
Well,
take over by confounding, by dismissing your disbelief, but
because I
dismissing
mean,
your
like,
negativity.
if you take a look at the magic itself, like take for instance, you know, John Dee would pray for about 15 to 30 minutes, and then Edward Kelly would just look into a stone. I mean, there's really nothing complicated about that. Um, Also, really, all you need is, you know, the holy table, the sigillum, scrying device, and then you call
Pure
different.
pure beeswax, you know.
Yeah, but it's not the instructions aren't hard once you have the setup, the elaborate
Yeah.
setup.
Well, and this might be a good segue for me to bring up how to hack it, right? How to just
Yeah, go ahead.
hack through
Go
the
ahead.
whole thing, right? So and you know, and modern technology is a big part of it. So the thing is you know, you could draw those, or you could actually, you know, now if you want to print out the sigil of Diameth, or if you want to buy one off eBay or whatever, you know, I mean, I know Gazelam has some. I've got this one. I've got some other tablets. If you want to just trace them, or if you want to draw it yourself. I mean, this is very intense. It does occupy your mind. It's
Yeah,
a form of
front foot.
hypnotism, like I said. So you got the same one, I think, probably. I'm not sure if they sell it on Etsy or what, but anyway, if you have
Oh,
that,
I have different friends that do them. So this one
oh yeah,
actually
yeah.
has the
That's
Enochian
nice.
lettering, where
Yeah.
this one's actually is the English lettering, or
So I actually,
other
but what I
other way
started
around.
with, it's kind of dirty. I'm a little interested. I mean, I have like an old Ouija board that I printed out and pasted the thing on. I don't know if you can
Oh,
see
that's
it.
cool.
It's kind of dirty.
Yeah,
I got this
yeah.
out of the garage, but yeah. So it's got this is like the whole table. I mean, so that's the thing too. Is how Lon would do it. Is he would actually, you know, just make Xerox copies of his book and hand out papers, you know, with this. And you could do the same. You can go online and find the Sigil Day of Myth. You could go and find these Enochian things and just print them out. If you want to color them yourself, you want to trace over them yourself, whatever you need to do that makes you comfortable that you understand it, just do it, right? As far and yeah, you're right. The only thing is the call, learning to say the words. So what happens is you could actually go on YouTube, and there's plenty. My favorite is actually the Israel Regardi recordings. Also, Lon is on there. He has videos of himself saying, recanting the ethers. They actually even have Aleister Crowley that says some Enochian, right? So you can actually get people online. And I'm planning to do this myself too. Is to recite these things online and put them on YouTube, right? And so you could just listen to those, and you could say along with them, or you could just say it in your head, or if you want to repeat it out yourself as much as you want, you're doing Enochian. That's hacking Enochian, right? Once you do that, from my experience, what happens is you do contact some spirits. The spirits actually try to decide what you're saying with whatever sounds you're making, and they'll actually give you your own language, your own glossolalic language, glossolalia, speaking in tongues type thing. They'll give you that language and say, if you want to evoke us, just say it. And you don't even have to learn it anymore. It's all in your subconscious mind. You just see like, you just say it all out like you're speaking in tongues, like in a Pentecostal church.
Mhm.
That's what happens in my experience. That's how I hacked Enochian, right? So at this point, I've got all this stuff. A lot of the stuff I've given out, like how like Gazelam says people send them stuff. I've sent. I don't even think I have Lon's book anymore because I've given it away. But Lon's online reading his book too. So you could go. YouTube is a huge source. Just search for Enochian magic on YouTube. You got all these people that are saying saying that the calls. You can learn them. Just know that start with the 30th Aether. Basically, what you're doing is saying this is the Aether I'm saying, and then you're repeating the angel names, the governors they call them, right? And you're meditating on these names, and those are supposed to say, these are the ones who create that universe. It's almost like Lon explained it a lot better. It's the idea is that these actually create our physical reality, and the 30th Aether is the one closest to us, farthest from God. It's like going up the tree of life. If you ever worked with the tree of life. So the lowest one, like the first Aether, would actually be the closest one to God. So you don't want to start with that, or you may go insane. That's the idea. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how you really hack the system, or how I hack the system.
That is what's wild about it, is how even when the angels gave their names to Dee and Kelly, they gave them to them backwards because they said it was too dangerous to say them forward.
Yeah,
and
also
something that's interesting.
It's a real language.
And then also something that's curious about it is how colorful and almost just I don't even know the word for it, gaudy or something. Like, they're just so colorful. But I guess when they were speaking to the angels said, "We don't care about color."
Yeah, no. Well, I mean that's
so
from the
funny.
Golden Dawn. That stuff is all from 300 years later. I mean, so they did
Yeah,
this in
yeah,
the 1580s. In the 1880s, that these were discovered again. The diaries and stuff were discovered. But I believe by McGregor Mathers and all those guys in the Golden Dawn that Aleister Crowley eventually joined and stuff like that. And they took that and they actually add a lot of their stuff into it. All these colors and all the things like that. Those are just from the Golden Dawn. And also they came up with Enochian chess. Have you heard of Enochian chess?
I have heard of that, but I don't know much about it. It looks
so what
cool.
they've done,
I think this has some.
Yeah, they took okay, so they took an already complicated system, which is Enochian, right? And they added up all their other stuff into it, all their Golden Dawn stuff into it, like the Egyptian gods and all that. So they actually took Egyptian gods and assigned them to different things in the Enochian. They have they turn these kind of like tables, like these kind of things. They turned into a giant chessboard, right? And then each chess piece is represented by a spirit and a Egyptian god and this and that, and you just literally I have no idea how to play it, but people do sell chess sets, and I know a lot of a big resource for me, and I want to give him a shout out, is Jason Augustus Newcomb. Or is it Newcomb or Newsom? I got his book here. Yeah, Newcomb. So here's his book here. It's looking. Let's see. All right, here we go. I got
Because your
right up here
background.
because I got my thing on. So Jason Augustus Newcomb, he sells a Enochian chess set. He says he could teach you how to play it if you want. I wouldn't, but it's all for fun, I mean, if this is your practice, that's your practice. But the Golden Dawn added all that, the colors.
Now, Guion, you had mentioned speaking in tongues. But let me ask you this: in some cases, people who speak in tongues, if they're not bullshitting, would you say that some people are legit speaking this Enochian language?
For sure, yeah. I would say I mean that's why me and my friends, I mean half jokingly, when I'm in a concert or something, I'll start doing that. I'll start speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
And people will be like, what the hell is that? And then my girlfriend or one of my girlfriends or one of my friends will say like, oh, he's speaking, it's Enochian, right? I mean, but who knows, right? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody know. I mean, who's to say no? I mean, nobody's. I mean, what are the chances at a concert or out at a club or something you're going to get somebody who's an expert who whips out, what are they going to do? Whip out like
All of a sudden,
the Enochian dictionary here and say,
they're like, by the
no,
way,
that's not.
I carry this in my back pocket.
You didn't conjugate that Enochian verb right.
They just speak it back to you.
There's not a lot of Enochian like you know how you get online like the grammar police. You don't got Enochian grammar police. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Hacking.
No, it's true
systems,
though.
Once you get your what I call your own personal language, right? And all
Right.
the props and stuff. Like I've got this lament, which is. I mean, I think it's pretty. It's not. I mean, John D had a lament and a ring. I can't find my ring. I had a ring too, and and it's. That's the idea, is just to bring the power to you and it works through you. And once you have your own language, I mean, who's to say that's not Enochian, right? I mean, people sing Enochian online and they're saying this is my Enochian or this is the Enochian, and just that's why they put in the Satanic Bible. That was Anton's Enochian, right? So people could have their own Enochian, just like everybody has their own English and Spanish, like English here in America is different than England, Australia, New Zealand, Africa. Right. Same thing
Even
with
in different
Spanish.
parts of the
Spanish
country,
in Spain, Spanish in Nicaragua is different.
Yeah.
I mean, Spanish is different. Spanish in Mexico is a lot mixed with the native, native tongues, and same thing with America. We have a lot of mixture. So the language,
it does.
Go ahead.
It does get really dogmatic though, with people that, like you were saying, you didn't pronounce that properly. I have this collection's pretty cool. It says, to pronounce the angelic or Enochian language, insert the next following Hebrew vowel between the consonants. Example.
Yeah.
E after B is Beth. I after G, Gamel. A after D, etc. Phonetic pronunciation is provided on the scroll. This one's pretty cool because it actually has the Enochian, then it has the phonetic pronunciation, the Roman characters, and then the English translation. So it's a pretty cool compiled collection. But I wanted to say really quick about that ring that you were talking about. It's really curious because, there's so many commonalities between Edward Kelly and Joseph Smith, the Mormon founder of Mormonism, and inside the very key word, the top key word in the Mormon endowment is Pele-El, and it's cool because on that Enochian ring is Pele.
Yeah.
And Pele means miracle. In Mormonism, Pele is, oh Lord, hear the words from my mouth. Pe is mouth in Hebrew, but you have Pele, the miracle, and Pele-El, miracle of God. And so it's just really, there's so much in common, even down to the polyandry and things like that. There's so many weird commonalities with the scrying and the translating languages, Joseph Smith's connection with translating the Book of Enoch, and Pele-El supposed to be the Adamic language and things like that. And so I just think it's really curious with that ring, how it has the P-A-L-A on it.
Yeah. I hope I find it soon. It's around here somewhere. But I mean, when the time is right, I'll find it and wear it again. But I haven't worn it for a few years now. But it's really, it almost makes you think, is this somewhere in the collective unconscious? Because how did Joseph Smith even? I mean, do you think that Joseph Smith had access to anything like Enochian? It is, I mean, it was just discovered in the 1880s. That was around his time, right? Maybe he heard about the Golden Dawn. I don't know. I mean, that's your area.
He would have been this would have been like 1820 or so. But there's a book called Mormonism and the Magical Worldview by Quinn, and it goes into how the influence of folk magic on Mormonism. And they know, because of some of the magical parchments owned by the Smith family, and what's on there, where those things came from, because the sigils and things like that, you know. Even the one there's this Jupiter talisman that Joseph Smith had on him when he died, they say, that has the sigil, and there in the symbol of the sigil, there's a break that was made, a printing error break in the sigil that was a printing error, and that shows up in Joseph Smith on his talisman. And so they know that the source of that was from this particular book because of the printing error that's in it. And so there's just things like that. So he did have it, that, you know, the Smith family, they say they did have access to these things, but so much of that also was passed down verbally, or like the early grimoires were mostly handwritten and then copied. And so you almost have a game of telephone, or or Chinese whispers, you know, where things get passed down, things start getting replaced or missing or left out, and or drawn incorrectly. Even with the early grimoires, you have like there's a symbol for Lucifer that got, up until 10 years, probably 10, 15 years ago, they always thought it was this Cholok god. There was a whole different, people were writing the wrong sigil for this particular god, for this particular demon. And it was actually a sigil for Lucifer. But then they're saying, oh, this is Cholok. But now that they've discovered these things, and so it's interesting, because are people willing to adjust things and go, oh, well, I've been invoking Lucifer all this time and I thought it was this other demon and stuff like that. So where do people, you know, are people, and that's what I find with the Enochian stuff, and especially as more and more information comes out, are people willing to modify their system, or are they already locked in? Have they been doing it wrong? And I think that's where it comes interesting.
I think
hacking.
Most people would be in denial and try to say that they've been invoking, you know, Lucifer this whole time, just because people don't like their feelings hurt. They don't like to be, you know,
found out that they've been doing it wrong.
At least most people, their ego.
Yeah. I mean, and most modern Christians, I mean, the vast majority, even pastors and stuff that study the Bible and everything, I'd say, like, you know, people that call themselves Christians, I don't consider myself a Christian. I mean, I know a lot about Gnostic Christianity, and I consider myself a chaos magician, and I could adopt Christianity if I want my own form. But most Christianity is like Christianity for dummies, you know? I mean, it's just, you know, you're just, I mean, like, you put in the concept of like Christ the serpent, right? Christ and Lucifer being the same kind of energy. They don't, no, that's just horrible. Satan, Lucifer's going to burn you in hell. You're going to hell for that. It's like, that's all they know, right? I mean, it's like, it's cultic, you know, Christianity for dummies, you know, anything that's Satan bad, anything. I mean, and is the world like that? It's like, okay, you know, like the whole like concept of the demiurge, that this universe, that this world was created by a god that you know, either he was a good god that had good intentions, but he didn't know how to do it right, or he was a bad god who made this as kind of like a little like ant farm, like a zoo, that he gets enjoyment out of us tormenting each other and going to war and hurting each other. I mean, whatever the thing is, the bottom is this planet is not perfect. You know, people go through horrible pain and suffering upon birth all the way to death. You know, I mean, in between there's a lot of good things, right? But why is birth such a trauma? Why does a woman go through so much pain and the child go through so much trauma and pain at birth? If we have a perfect God, why don't we just, you know, like the stork delivers the baby or something? I mean, why are babies born dead? Why are babies born dead? I mean, what sin did the baby commit in the womb to be born dead? Why is that? Why did you know, these questions can't be answered, and they just were like, well, God's good, but he does that stuff to test us or something. I mean, they just come up with some, you know. I mean, why would a baby be born dead and why even have the concept of sin? That we have to do certain things in our life if certain people are born suffering, people are born without an arm, right? What do they do? You know, I mean, Buddhism, I think, encapsulates it a lot better. You know, it's kind of
So
like
much better.
it amplifies it. It can't, you know. But most Christians are like, yeah, they're kind of like dummies. I mean, really, honestly, they're very
Well, like
judgmental, and then, you know,
look at the Olympics that happened where they thought the Feast of Dionysus was the Last Supper, you know,
uh-huh.
and they made a
It's a
big deal about it
bacchanal.
until Paris had to actually apologize. But you know, I saw something that said that the same group that thought that that was the Last Supper is the same group that wants to get rid of the Department of Education. Like how
Yeah.
ironic, you know?
I mean,
Well, and then there's
that
whole people that believe that you know, denounce science and say, because the Bible, they've somehow figured out that, you know, the Earth has only been around for 10,000 years, and we were around when the dinosaurs were here. You know, and humans were interacting with dinosaurs and all this kind of stuff that just been just proven by science, but they don't care. You know.
They don't
I
care.
mean, we've gone so far that we're putting the 10 Commandments in public schools. I
saw
mean,
that.
and when you look at the 10 Commandments, there aren't any moral laws in there. Maybe like 2, stealing, killing. The rest is all just some jealous God being a whiny bitch.
Right.
Well,
Going,
and
oh,
plus
don't.
you know, if you really philosophize it out, I mean, it's like the way that God in the Old Testament says, I'm a jealous God, you know, no gods before me. And then, but he's the only God. So who's he comparing himself to, right? If I'm saying I'm the only human, everybody else is just a non-player character, then what? Why would I worry about anybody else? I mean, it's like, all right, go ahead and worry about these other guys because they're, you know, you're just wasting your time because I'm
Yeah.
the only human. I mean, why
Because
would
you'd
he say
have
I'm a
to be
jealous God?
insecure
Don't worship other gods, but I'm the only God.
So in Utah, there's a Hare Krishna temple that's pretty close to us, and they always would play this Hare Krishna radio, and I was listening to it one time, and it was pretty cool because the guy was saying, Krishna doesn't care what you say about him. In fact, even if you say Krishna derogatorily, if you say his name in vain, you get blessed just for saying his name. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty cool God that you can say, fuck you, Krishna.
Yeah.
And he's gonna bless you, you know, where, you know, you got Yahweh, and Yahweh's like, Yahweh, you're the highway.
He's
Get out.
so tight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it goes down to also, like, I mean, that's why I say that Satanism and witchcraft and all that, they're kind of just like problem child denominations of Christianity, you know, because I mean, they're doing, if they're doing the opposite or doing things that they say not to do, it's kind of like rebelling against your parents. You know, you're still parents,
Yeah.
right? You're just rebelling against your parents, you
Well,
know.
a lot of us
So they,
occultists,
you know,
a lot of us start out there, you know, as
yeah. I
Satanists,
think
and then
most
go
people are
from there.
based on that. Most people are based on the bad experiences they had with their parents' version of Christianity or something like
Yeah.
that.
A lot, yeah, it happens. But well, guys, it's been a good chat. I've enjoyed this. Thanks for coming on. Everyone who wants to check out their social media links, they'll all be below in the video description for Guion and Gazelam. And everyone who's watching, go ahead and like and subscribe to Dark Sorcery.
Woohoo.